My mom texted, "We don't trust you anymore." I replied, "Understood." What she didn't know was that I had just discovered why my dad's business partner had been visiting our house every Tuesday for the past 3 years, and it wasn't for business meetings. The message came in at 11:23 p.m., right as I was staring at a stack of financial documents that would destroy everything my family had built. The blue light from my phone cut through the darkness of my apartment, and for a moment, I thought about calling her back, explaining what I'd found, telling her that Uncle Rick wasn't the family friend we thought he was. But I didn't. Instead, I typed those 6 letters that would end my relationship with my family forever. Understood. No questions, no fight, no desperate plea for them to listen to what I discovered. Because here's the thing about finding out your family is involved in something that could send them all to prison. Sometimes the person trying to save them becomes the enemy. Sometimes the son who asks too many questions becomes the threat. Sometimes doing the right thing makes you the wrong person to trust. 3 days later, federal agents would be knocking on their door. 6 months later, Uncle Rick would disappear with $400,000 of laundered money. And my family would blame me for all of it. But that night, sitting in my dark apartment with evidence of crimes spread across my coffee table, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't the problem. I was just the only one willing to see the problem. This story doesn't start with that text message, though. It starts 3 months earlier, when I made the mistake of caring enough to ask why our family business was suddenly making more money than ever. But my parents seemed more stressed than they'd been in years. It starts with me being the only one who noticed that Uncle Rick's Tuesday visits always happened when Tyler was conveniently out of town. Let me paint you a picture of what normal looked like in the Henderson family. My dad, Michael, built Henderson's auto parts from nothing. Started in 1995 with a $10,000 loan and a dream of being his own boss in our small town of Millfield. 28 years later, it was the go-to place for anyone within 50 miles who needed car parts, repairs, or just wanted to shoot the breeze about engines. My mom, Susan, handled the books. She had this way of making customers feel like family, remembering their kids' names, asking about their sick relatives, always having coffee ready. Together, they created something that felt permanent, reliable, the kind of business that makes a town feel like home. Then there was Tyler, my younger brother, 3 years apart, but we might as well have been from different planets. Where I was methodical, he was spontaneous. Where I asked questions, he just went with the flow. Tyler had this natural charm that made people gravitate toward him. Customers loved him. He could sell a transmission to someone who came in for windshield wipers, and they'd leave thinking they got the deal of the century. Me? I was the numbers guy. Always had been. While Tyler was out front making friends and closing sales, I was in the back office during summers, organizing inventory, spotting discrepancies, making sure everything added up. Dad used to joke that I was born with a calculator instead of a rattle. After college, I became a CPA. Got my own practice, my own apartment across town, my own life. But I still helped with the family business during tax season, busy periods, whenever they needed an extra set of eyes on the books. It felt good to contribute, to be useful to the family business that had paid for my education. Tyler, meanwhile, never left. At 25, he was still living in his childhood bedroom, but nobody seemed to mind. He was the heir apparent, the face of Henderson's auto parts future. Dad was already talking about changing the name to Henderson & Son when he retired. I was fine with that arrangement, really. Tyler was better with people, better at the day-to-day operations. I had my own career, my own path. We each found our place in the family ecosystem. Then there was Uncle Rick. Rick Morrison wasn't actually our uncle. He was Dad's best friend since high school, business partner for the last 20 years, and practically family. Rick owned Morrison's towing service, and they had this symbiotic relationship. Rick would tow broken-down cars to Henderson's, Dad would fix them, everyone made money. Rick was at every birthday, every holiday, every major family event. He was the guy who taught Tyler how to drive stick shift, who helped me with my first car loan application. Rick was also the guy who started showing up every Tuesday at 2 p.m. for business meetings that lasted exactly 45 minutes. I first noticed the pattern 6 months ago when I was dropping off some paperwork. Rick's truck was in the driveway, which wasn't unusual. But when I walked into the house, the conversation stopped. Mom looked flustered. Dad seemed irritated that I'd interrupted. Rick just smiled, that easy smile of his, and said they were discussing expansion opportunities. The second time I noticed was 3 weeks later. Same day, same time, same abrupt silence when I walked in. This time, Tyler was there too, sitting at the kitchen table with a serious expression I'd never seen on his face before. "Family meeting?" I asked. "Just business stuff," Tyler said quickly. "Nothing you need to worry about?" Nothing I needed to worry about. That phrase started showing up a lot. When I asked about the new security system Dad installed, when I wondered why Mom seemed nervous around the computer lately, when I mentioned that the business seemed to be doing really well, better than the local economy would suggest. Nothing you need to worry about, David. But here's the thing about being an accountant. You're trained to worry about things that don't add up, and more things weren't adding up. Like how Tyler suddenly had money for a brand new truck when his salary hadn't changed. Like how my parents, who had always been careful with money, suddenly seemed to have cash for home improvements, expensive dinners. A vacation to Florida they'd been talking about for years but could never afford. Like how the business was reporting its best year ever, but Dad seemed more stressed than I'd seen him since the early days when they were struggling to keep the lights on. I tried to convince myself it was just good business. Maybe they'd landed a big contract. Maybe Rick's towing service was bringing in more customers than usual. Maybe I was overthinking things because that's what accountants do. We see problems where there aren't any. But then came the day I offered to help with quarterly taxes, and Dad said they'd already handled it, without me, for the first time in 15 years. That's when I knew something was really wrong. Because Michael Henderson asking for help with taxes was like the sun rising in the east. It just happened, every quarter, like clockwork. That's when I started paying closer attention to those Tuesday meetings. That's when I started noticing the little details that didn't fit the picture of a simple family business doing well. And that's when I made the mistake of caring enough to dig deeper. The first real crack in the facade happened on a Thursday in March. I was having lunch at Mel's Diner, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone's business before they know it themselves, when I overheard something that made my coffee taste like ash. 2 guys from the county tax office were sitting in the booth behind me, talking about unusual cash deposits they'd been tracking. One of them mentioned Henderson's auto parts, specifically. "Weird pattern," he said. "Business like that doesn't usually see that kind of cash flow consistency. Almost like clockwork." I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, listening to them discuss my family's business like it was some kind of anomaly. When they left, I couldn't finish my sandwich. I drove straight to the shop. Dad was under the hood of a '98 Chevy, grease up to his elbows, looking exactly like he had my entire childhood. Normal, familiar, safe. "Hey, kiddo," he said without looking up. "What brings you by?" "Just wanted to see how things were going. Business seems really good lately." His hands stopped moving for just a second, just a heartbeat, but I caught it. "Can't complain," he said, still not looking at me. "Rick's been sending us more customers than usual. Good problem to have. Speaking of Rick, I keep missing him when I stop by. You guys meeting more often these days?" Now he did look up, and for the first time in my life, my father looked at me like I was a stranger asking too many questions. "David, is there something specific you need? Because I've got 3 cars to finish before closing." The dismissal stung more than it should have. This was my dad, the guy who used to explain every repair to me in detail, who taught me that understanding how things work was the key to fixing them when they break. I drove home that night with a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. The second crack came 2 weeks later. I was at Mom and Dad's house for Sunday dinner, a tradition that had survived my moving out, Tyler's various girlfriends, and even Dad's heart attack 3 years ago. We were sitting around the same kitchen table where I'd done homework, where Tyler had carved his initials when he was 8, where Rick had sat for countless family meals over the years. Tyler was telling some story about a customer who tried to return brake pads he'd clearly used for 6 months, and everyone was laughing. Normal family dinner, except Tyler kept checking his phone. "Expecting a call?" I asked. "Just keeping an eye on things," he said, but his smile looked forced. That's when I noticed the phone itself. Brand new iPhone, top of the line. Tyler had been complaining about his cracked screen for months, saying he couldn't afford to replace it. "Nice phone," I said casually. "Early birthday present," Mom said quickly. Too quickly. Tyler's birthday wasn't for 4 months. After dinner, I helped Mom with dishes while Dad and Tyler watched the game. It was our routine. Had been since I was tall enough to reach the sink. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course, honey. Is everything okay? With the business, I mean. You seem tense lately." Her hands stilled in the soapy water. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell me what was going on. But then she smiled, that bright, artificial smile she used with difficult customers. "Everything's fine, David." "Better than fine, actually. Your father's worked so hard for this success, but you seem worried about something. The only thing I'm worried about is you working too hard. When's the last time you went on a date? Brought a nice girl around for dinner?" Subject changed. Door closed. Message received. The third crack was the one that broke everything open. I was dropping off some tax documents Dad had forgotten to sign. Even though he'd insisted he didn't need my help this year, he apparently still needed my signature on a few partnership papers. The house was supposed to be empty. Dad was at the shop. Mom was at her book club. Tyler was supposedly visiting his girlfriend in the next town over. But Rick's truck was in the driveway. I used my key. I'd had one since I moved out, for emergencies and family dinners. The house was quiet, but I could hear voices coming from Dad's home office. The door was closed, but the old house had thin walls. "Can't keep increasing the amounts," I heard Dad say. "People are going to notice." "People are already noticing," Rick's voice, lower than usual. "Your boy David's been asking questions." My blood went cold. "David doesn't know anything," Tyler's voice. "He was supposed to be an hour away. He's just being David, overthinking everything." "Overthinking can be dangerous," Rick said. Maybe it's time to limit his access. He's my son, Dad's voice strained. And I'm trying to protect your son, all of us, but this only works if everyone stays quiet. I stood there in my childhood hallway, next to the family photos that chronicled 28 years of birthdays and graduations and holidays, listening to my family discuss me like I was a threat to be managed. That's when I heard the sound that changed everything, the distinctive click of a briefcase opening. Then Rick's voice again. This month's delivery. Same as always. Tyler, you know what to do with your cut. Tyler's cut. My little brother, who couldn't balance his own checkbook, had a cut of something that required monthly deliveries and absolute silence. I backed away from the door as quietly as I could, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they'd hear it. I made it to my car and sat there for 10 minutes, hands shaking, trying to process what I'd just heard. When I finally drove away, I caught a glimpse of Rick's truck in my rearview mirror. Still there, still conducting whatever business required my family's silence and my exclusion. That night, I made a decision that would destroy everything I thought I knew about the people I loved most. I decided to find out what was really happening during those Tuesday meetings. The investigation started small. I told myself I was just being thorough, just making sure my family wasn't in over their heads with something they didn't understand. I wasn't spying on them. I was protecting them. That's what I kept telling myself as I sat in my car across from Henderson's Auto Parts at 1:45 p.m. the following Tuesday, waiting for Rick's truck to pull up. He arrived exactly on time, punctual as always. But instead of going into the shop like he had for 20 years, he walked around to the back entrance, the one that led directly to Dad's office, the one customers never used. I waited 15 minutes, then walked into the shop through the front door like any normal visit. Tyler was at the counter helping Mrs. Patterson with a battery replacement. He looked up when I walked in, and I swear I saw panic flash across his face before he forced a smile. Hey, David. What's up? Just wanted to grab those invoices Dad said he'd have ready. Is he in his office? He's in a meeting right now. Maybe come back later. Mrs. Patterson looked between us, sensing the tension. Tyler's smile was getting more strained by the second. I'll just wait, I said, settling into one of the plastic chairs in the waiting area. Don't mind me. Tyler couldn't exactly kick me out without causing a scene, but I could see him texting frantically under the counter. 5 minutes later, Rick emerged from the back office, briefcase in hand, looking completely normal except for the way his eyes found mine immediately. David, good to see you, son. How's the accounting business? Can't complain. How's the towing business? Busy as ever. Your dad and I were just discussing some new opportunities. Dad appeared behind him, and I'd never seen my father look so uncomfortable in his own shop. Rick was just leaving, Dad said quickly. David, those invoices aren't ready yet. I'll call you when they are. But I was already moving toward the office. That's okay. I can wait while you finish them up. David. Dad's voice had an edge I'd never heard before. I said, I'll call you. The shop went quiet. Mrs. Patterson was pretending to examine battery warranties, but I could feel her listening. Tyler had stopped pretending to work entirely. Rick was standing perfectly still, watching this family drama unfold. Is there a problem? I asked, looking directly at Dad. The only problem, Rick said smoothly, is that some conversations are private, business sensitive. I'm sure you understand. Actually, I don't understand. This is my family's business. I've been involved in the financial side for 15 years. Things change, Tyler said quietly. I stared at my little brother, the kid I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, covered for when he snuck out in high school. He couldn't meet my eyes. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I used my CPA credentials to run a background check on recent business filings for Henderson's Auto Parts. What I found made my stomach drop. 3 months ago, the business had been restructured. New partnership agreements, new financial arrangements, and my name, which had been listed as the designated financial advisor since I got my license, had been removed from everything. They'd cut me out officially, legally, completely. And they'd done it while still asking me to help with small stuff to keep me from noticing. I spent the next week digging deeper. Bank records I could access through legitimate channels, public filings, tax documents. The picture that emerged was like watching a familiar photograph slowly morph into something unrecognizable. Cash deposits that didn't match reported sales, payments to shell companies that didn't seem to exist, money moving in patterns that made no sense for a small-town auto parts store. And Rick's towing company was right in the middle of it all. The confrontation happened on a Saturday. I'd been planning what to say for days, how to approach it, how to give them a chance to explain before jumping to conclusions. I drove to the house around noon, when I knew they'd all be there for Mom's weekly family lunch. I walked in to find them all sitting around the kitchen table, but they weren't eating. They were looking at papers spread across the surface, financial documents, the same kind I'd been studying all week. They looked up when I entered, and the guilt on their faces told me everything I needed to know. We need to talk, I said. David? Mom started, but Dad held up a hand. Sit down, son. I sat. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Dad cleared his throat. How much do you know? I know enough to be scared for all of you." Tyler laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Scared? David, we're making more money than we ever dreamed of. With money that doesn't make sense, from sources that don't exist, through a business partner who's been lying to all of us for God knows how long." "Rick hasn't been lying," Dad said quietly. "We've known exactly what we were doing." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You've known?" "David," Mom said, reaching across the table, "it's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." They looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, Dad spoke. "Rick's been helping us clean money for some people, business associates of his. Nothing violent, nothing dangerous, just moving money from one place to another." "Money laundering?" I said the words clearly, making sure there was no misunderstanding. "Such an ugly term." Rick's voice came from behind me. I hadn't heard him come in. "I prefer financial consulting." I turned around. Rick was standing in the doorway, no longer the family friend who'd been at every birthday party. Now he looked like exactly what he was, a criminal who'd been using my family. "How long?" I asked. 3 years, Tyler said. "Since right after Dad's heart attack. We were drowning in medical bills. The business was struggling, and Rick offered to help. By making you accessories to federal crimes? By saving our family," Mom said fiercely. "By keeping us from losing everything your father built. And what happens when you get caught?" "We don't get caught," Rick said, settling into the chair across from me like he owned the place. "Because everyone keeps their mouth shut and minds their own business." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. "David," Dad said, "this doesn't concern you. You have your own life, your own career. This is our problem, our solution. Our family," Tyler added, "and family protects family." I looked around the table at these people I'd loved my entire life. My parents, who'd taught me right from wrong. My brother, who I'd always tried to protect. And Rick, who'd been like an uncle to me for 28 years. "What you're asking me to do is pretend I don't know that my family is committing felonies. What we're asking you to do," Rick said, "is trust us, the way families should. And if I can't do that?" The silence stretched out for what felt like hours. Finally, Dad spoke. "Then maybe you're not the family man we thought you were." I stood up slowly. "Maybe I'm not." I walked to the door, then turned back. "You have 48 hours to figure out how to get out of this. After that, I'm going to do what I should have done the moment I figured it out." "David," Mom called after me, "don't do something you'll regret." I paused in the doorway. The only thing I regret is not asking questions sooner. That was Sunday afternoon. By Tuesday morning, I had copies of everything. Bank records, transaction patterns, shell company formations, Rick's real business connections. And that's when my phone buzzed with the message that ended everything. "We don't trust you anymore." The message came at 11:23 p.m. on Tuesday, exactly 48 hours after I'd given them my ultimatum. I was sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by printed bank statements, transaction records, and a timeline I'd been building that connected Rick's business associates to a network that stretched far beyond our small town. "We don't trust you anymore." 6 words that felt like a door slamming shut on 28 years of family dinners, birthday parties, and bedtime stories. I stared at the screen for a full minute before typing back, "Understood." What they didn't know was that I'd spent those 48 hours doing more than just waiting. I'd been digging deeper into Rick's operation, and what I'd found was so much worse than simple money laundering. Rick Morrison wasn't just cleaning money. He was running a sophisticated operation that used legitimate businesses across 3 counties as fronts for moving drug money. Henderson's Auto Parts wasn't his only victim. It was just the most personal one, and my family wasn't just involved. They were trapped. I'd found the real reason Dad had agreed to this arrangement, buried in medical records I'd accessed through our family's shared insurance account. Dad's heart attack hadn't been his first cardiac event. There had been a second one, 6 months later, that he'd hidden from everyone except Mom. The medical bills weren't just expensive, they were catastrophic. The kind that could bankrupt a small business and destroy a family's future. Rick had offered them a lifeline when they were drowning, but lifelines from people like Rick Morrison always came with hooks. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became that my family wasn't just laundering money, they were being systematically blackmailed. Rick had evidence of their involvement, documentation of every transaction, records that would send them all to prison if they ever tried to back out. My phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Wednesday morning. Unknown number. "David Henderson?" "Speaking." "This is Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We need to talk." My blood went cold. "About what?" "About your family's business, about Rick Morrison, about the choice you're going to have to make in the next 24 hours. We met at a coffee shop 2 towns over, the kind of place where nobody would recognize either of us. Agent Chen was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. "We've been investigating Morrison's operation for 18 months, she said without preamble. "Your family's business came up in our financial analysis 6 months ago. Are they in trouble?" That depends on you. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs. Rick meeting with known drug dealers, financial records that dwarfed what I'd been able to access, surveillance photos that included my father and Tyler. We know your family isn't the mastermind here, Agent Chen continued. We know they're victims as much as they are participants, but we also know that Morrison has been using their business to clean approximately $200,000 per month for the past 3 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. $200,000 per month. Over $7 million had passed through my family's business. What do you want from me? We want Morrison, and we want the people he's working for. Your family can help us get both. And if they refuse, then they go down with him when we make arrests next week. Next week. I had days, not months or years. Days to convince my family to cooperate with federal agents against a man who'd been like family to us for decades. There's something else, Agent Chen said. Morrison knows we're closing in. Our sources suggest he's planning to disappear soon. When he does, he'll take everything with him and leave your family holding the bag for 3 years of federal crimes. She pulled out another document, a federal indictment already prepared, with my parents and Tyler's names listed as co-conspirators. This gets filed Friday unless we have their cooperation by Thursday night. I drove home in a daze, the weight of my family's future pressing down on me like a physical thing. I had less than 36 hours to convince them to betray someone they trusted, to admit to crimes they'd been committing for years, to trust federal agents over the man who'd been saving them. That evening, I called Tyler. We need to meet, all of us, tonight. David, after what happened Sunday. Tyler, listen to me very carefully. Rick is going to disappear, probably within days. When he does, he's going to leave you, Mom and Dad, facing federal charges for money laundering, conspiracy, and racketeering. The FBI already has enough evidence to arrest all of you. Silence on the other end. How do you know that? Because I've been trying to save you just like I tried to save you Sunday. Just like I've been trying to save this family my entire life. David, Henderson's Auto Parts, 9 p.m. Come alone, but make sure Mom and Dad are there too. I hung up before he could argue. At 9 p.m., I was sitting in Dad's office when they arrived, all 3 of them, looking like they were walking to their own execution. Maybe they were. Before anyone says anything, I started, I need you to understand something. Rick Morrison is not your friend. He never was. He's been using our family business to launder money for drug dealers, and when the FBI arrests him, which will happen in the next few days, he's going to disappear and leave all of you to face federal charges alone. Dad sat down heavily. How do you know this? Because the FBI contacted me this morning. They've been investigating Rick for 18 months. They have surveillance footage, financial records, and enough evidence to put all of you in federal prison for the next 20 years. Mom made a sound like she'd been punched. But, I continued, they're willing to offer you immunity in exchange for cooperation. Cooperation? Tyler's voice was barely a whisper. You helped them catch Rick and his associates. You testify about how he recruited you, how the operation worked, how he threatened you to keep you involved. He never threatened us, Dad said. I pulled out my phone and played a recording I'd made during my investigation. Rick's voice, captured during one of his Tuesday visits when I'd hidden a recorder in Dad's office. Your boy David's been asking questions. Maybe it's time to limit his access. This only works if everyone stays quiet. There are people involved in this who don't appreciate loose ends. The color drained from Dad's face. He's been recording your conversations, I said. He has evidence of everything you've done. When he disappears, he'll use that evidence to make sure you can't implicate him. You'll be the only ones left to prosecute. What exactly are you asking us to do? Mom asked. I'm asking you to save yourselves. I'm asking you to trust me instead of the man who's been manipulating you for 3 years. Tyler stood up abruptly. This is insane. Rick saved us. When Dad was sick, when we were about to lose everything, Rick offered us a way out. Rick offered you a trap, I said. And now the trap is closing. You don't understand, Dad said. It's not just about the money anymore. Rick knows things, about the business, about our family. If we betray him, if you don't betray him, you'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison, and he'll be living on a beach somewhere with the money you helped him steal. I pulled out Agent Chen's business card and placed it on the desk. You have until tomorrow night to decide. Call her, cooperate with the investigation, and you might get to keep your freedom. Don't call her, and I guarantee you'll lose everything. I stood to leave, then turned back. And just so we're clear, I've already given the FBI everything I found. With or without your cooperation, Rick Morrison is going down. The only question is whether you go down with him. I walked toward the door, then stopped when Tyler called my name. David. I turned around. Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to destroy our family? The question hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, I saw my little brother as he used to be, the kid who looked up to me, who trusted me to protect him from the world's dangers. I'm not trying to destroy our family, Tyler. I'm trying to save what's left of it. I left them sitting in that office, surrounded by 28 years of family history and facing a choice that would determine whether they had any future left to save. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "We don't trust you anymore." That's when I knew they'd made their choice, and that's when I made mine. I called Agent Chen. "They're not going to cooperate." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure, but I have something else for you. Everything I've documented about their involvement, plus recordings of Rick's threats, plus financial records that prove they were coerced. That's enough to build a case for them as victims rather than willing participants." "Good, because they're going to need all the help they can get." "What about you, David? This is going to destroy your relationship with your family." I looked around my apartment at the life I'd built separate from the family business, separate from the weekly dinners and holiday traditions, and the comfortable illusion that we were just a normal family running a normal business. Agent Chen, my relationship with my family was destroyed the moment they chose to trust a criminal over their own son. Understood. Friday morning, federal agents arrested Rick Morrison at his home. They found $400,000 in cash, false identification documents, and plane tickets to a non-extradition country dated for that afternoon. They also found detailed records of every business he'd compromised, every family he'd manipulated, and every threat he'd made to keep them in line. My family wasn't arrested, but they weren't saved either, because sometimes doing the right thing doesn't fix anything. Sometimes it just reveals how broken things already were. The arrests made the front page of the Millfield Gazette. A local businessman arrested in multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme. Rick's mugshot stared back at me from the newspaper stand outside the coffee shop where I'd met Agent Chen just 5 days earlier. 5 days. That's all it took to dismantle a life that had taken 28 years to build. The article was surprisingly thorough for a small-town paper. Rick Morrison, 52, arrested on federal charges including money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. Operation spanned 3 counties, involved multiple legitimate businesses, estimated $12 million in illegal transactions over 4 years. Henderson's Auto Parts was mentioned in paragraph 3. Among the businesses allegedly used in the scheme. No names, no details about my family's involvement. Agent Chen had kept her word about treating them as victims rather than co-conspirators. But in a town of 8,000 people, anonymity was impossible. I was getting coffee when Mrs. Patterson, the same woman who'd been buying a battery the day I'd confronted Tyler, approached me with the cautious expression people wear when they're about to ask about tragedy. "David, honey, is your family okay? I saw the news about Rick and, well, everyone knows how close your families were." "They're fine, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you for asking." It must be such a shock. Rick seemed like such a nice man. You just never know about people, do you? You really don't, I thought. But I just nodded and paid for my coffee. The phone calls started that afternoon. First Tyler, then Mom, then Dad. I let them all go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear their voices yet. Wasn't ready for the conversation we'd eventually have to have. Tyler's message was the shortest. "David, we need to talk. Please call me back." Mom's was longer, more emotional. "Honey, I know you're upset with us, but we're family. We need to stick together right now. Please come home." Dad's was the hardest to listen to. "Son, I know you think you did the right thing. Maybe you did. But right now, your family needs you. Whatever our differences, we're still your family." I saved all 3 messages, but didn't return the calls. Instead, I drove to Henderson's Auto Parts. The parking lot was nearly empty, unusual for a Thursday afternoon. Through the windows, I could see Tyler at the counter, but no customers. The federal investigation had become public knowledge, and apparently people were staying away. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, watching my brother work alone in the shop that had been the center of our family's life for nearly 3 decades. He looked older somehow, like the weight of the past week had aged him years and days. Finally, I got out of the car and walked inside. Tyler looked up when the bell chimed, and for a moment his face lit up with relief. Then he remembered we weren't speaking, and the expression faded. "David." "Tyler." We stood there for a moment, 2 brothers who'd run out of words. "How bad is it?" I asked finally. "Bad. We've lost about 60% of our customers since the news broke. People are scared to be associated with us. What about the legal situation? Agent Chen says we're not being charged. Cooperating witnesses, she called us. Victims of Rick's manipulation." He said it like the words tasted bitter. "That's good news." "Is it? Because it doesn't feel good? It feels like we're betraying someone who helped us when we needed it most." I stared at my brother. "Tyler, Rick was using you, all of you. He wasn't helping. He was exploiting your desperation." "Maybe. But he also kept us from losing everything when Dad was sick. And then he made sure you could never escape. That's not help, Tyler. That's entrapment." Tyler leaned against the counter, suddenly looking exhausted. "Do you know what the worst part is?" "What?" "I keep thinking about all the times you tried to ask questions, tried to understand what was happening. And we shut you out. We made you the enemy for caring about us. The admission hung in the air between us. Why? I asked. Why did you choose to trust him over me? Tyler was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because trusting Rick was easier. He never asked us to change, never made us feel guilty about the choices we'd made. He just said, keep doing what you're doing, and everything will be fine. And trusting me? Trusting you meant admitting we'd made terrible mistakes. It meant facing the possibility that we'd destroyed everything Dad built. It meant... He paused, struggling with the words. It meant admitting that the responsible son we'd always taken for granted was the only one trying to save us. I felt something break loose in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. Tyler, I never wanted to be right about this. I know, that's what makes it worse. The bell chimed again, and Agent Chen walked in. She nodded to both of us, her expression professional but not unkind. Mr. Henderson, she said to Tyler, I wanted to update you on the investigation. Tyler straightened up. What's the news? Rick Morrison has agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's providing information about his entire network. Suppliers, other businesses involved, financial structures. It's going to help us shut down operations across 3 states. What does that mean for us? It means you're officially clear of any criminal liability. The federal prosecutor has agreed to classify your family as victims of coercion. There will be no charges filed. Tyler's relief was visible, but Agent Chen wasn't finished. However, there will be financial consequences. The money that passed through your business, all of it, has to be traced and accounted for. The IRS will be conducting a full audit. Any profits from the illegal activities will have to be returned. How much are we talking about? Tyler asked. Based on our preliminary analysis, probably around $180,000 over 3 years. Money that was paid to your family as fees for the laundering services. Tyler's face went white. We don't have that kind of money. I know, that's why the government is willing to work out a payment plan. But the business will likely need to be sold to cover the debt. Henderson's Auto Parts. 28 years of Dad's life, gone. After Agent Chen left, Tyler and I stood in the empty shop, surrounded by the tools and parts and memories of a family business that was about to become history. What are you going to do? I asked. I don't know. Start over, I guess. Maybe get a job at one of the other shops in town if anyone will hire me. And Mom and Dad? Dad's talking about early retirement. Mom's not talking much at all. I looked around the shop one more time. At the workbench where Dad had taught me to change oil. At the office where I'd learned to read financial statements. At the waiting area where customers had become friends over the years. Tyler, I want you to know something. I didn't do this to hurt you. Any of you. I know. I did it because I love you. Because I couldn't watch you destroy yourselves. Tyler nodded, but he couldn't meet my eyes. The thing is, David, I'm not sure love is enough to fix this. He was right. Love wasn't enough. Not anymore. Because sometimes saving someone means losing them. And sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything you thought you were trying to protect. 6 months later, I was sitting in my therapist's office trying to explain why I didn't feel guilty about destroying my family's life. That's an interesting way to phrase it, Dr. Martinez said. Do you really believe you destroyed their life, or did you reveal that their life was already destroyed? It was a question I'd been wrestling with since the day Rick was arrested. Had I saved my family or betrayed them? Had I done the right thing, or just the thing that felt right to me? I think, I said slowly, I revealed that we'd been living a lie for 3 years, maybe longer. How so? We weren't a close family who helped each other through tough times. We were a family so broken that we chose criminal activity over honest conversation. We chose a stranger's manipulation over trusting each other. The truth was harder to accept than I'd expected. For years, I told myself that the Hendersons were a solid family unit. Dad built the business, Mom kept everyone together, Tyler brought the charm, and I provided the stability. We each had our role, and the system worked. But systems built on lies don't work. They just postpone the inevitable collapse. When did you first realize your family didn't trust you? Dr. Martinez asked. Honestly? Probably years before Rick ever showed up. I was always the one asking questions they didn't want to answer. The one who noticed discrepancies they wanted to ignore. The one who suggested solutions they weren't ready to hear. I thought about all the times I'd offered to help with the business finances, only to be told it wasn't necessary. All the family conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. All the decisions made without consulting the son who'd been handling their taxes for 15 years. I think they stopped trusting me the moment I became competent enough to see their problems clearly. And why do you think that threatened them? Because I represented accountability. Rick represented escape. That was the core of it, really. Rick had offered my family a way to solve their problems without having to change anything about themselves. No difficult conversations about Dad's health, no honest assessment of the business's financial situation, no acknowledgement that they'd been living beyond their means for years. Rick's solution let them keep their pride, their lifestyle, and their illusions. My solution would have required them to face reality. Do you think you could have handled things differently, Doctor? Martinez asked. I'd thought about that question every day for 6 months. Maybe I could have been less confrontational. I could have tried harder to understand their perspective before pushing for answers. I could have approached it as a family problem instead of a financial crime. But I don't think it would have mattered. The fundamental issue wasn't my approach. It was that they'd already chosen to trust Rick over me. They'd already decided that preserving their comfort was more important than preserving their integrity. The hardest lesson I'd learned was that you can't save people who don't want to be saved. You can't force people to make good choices. You can't love someone into being honest. I spent my whole life trying to be the son they needed, I continued. The responsible one, the problem solver, the one who never caused trouble. But when they actually needed someone to solve their biggest problem, they chose the criminal over the CPA. How does that make you feel? Free. The word surprised me as much as it surprised Dr. Martinez. Free? For 28 years, I've been trying to earn my place in that family, trying to prove I was valuable, trying to demonstrate my worth through my usefulness. When they chose Rick over me, they finally made it clear that my worth to them was never about who I was. It was about what I could do for them. And now I don't have to try anymore. I don't have to prove anything to anyone. I can just be myself without worrying about whether it's enough for them. The strangest part of the whole experience was how much lighter I felt. Not happy. The loss of my family still hurt. But lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't even realize was there. I used to think family was about unconditional love, I said. But I learned that some families only love you conditionally. As long as you don't ask uncomfortable questions, don't challenge their decisions, don't force them to face truths they'd rather avoid. What do you think family should be about? Honesty? Trust? The willingness to have difficult conversations because you care more about each other's well-being than your own comfort. Do you think you'll ever have that kind of family? I thought about the question. About the friends who'd supported me through the investigation, about the colleagues who'd respected my decision even when they didn't understand it, about the possibility of building relationships based on who I was rather than what I could provide. I think I'm learning that family isn't just about blood. It's about choosing people who choose you back, people who trust you enough to be honest with you, even when the truth is uncomfortable. And your biological family? They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. The choice to stop trying to fix people who didn't want to be fixed. The choice to stop accepting love that came with conditions. The choice to build a life based on my own values instead of other people's expectations. It wasn't the family story I'd grown up expecting to tell, but it was honest. And after 28 years of living in other people's lies, honesty felt like coming home. 1 year later, I was standing in the checkout line at the grocery store when I saw Tyler. He was 3 people ahead of me, wearing a uniform I didn't recognize, blue shirt with Peterson's Automotive embroidered on the pocket. He looked thinner than I remembered, older, but there was something different about his posture. Less of the easy confidence he'd always carried, but also less of the weight he'd been carrying that last year at Henderson's. He turned around while waiting for his receipt, and our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he gave me a small nod, not quite a smile, but not hostile either, just acknowledgement. I nodded back. He left without saying anything, and I realized I was okay with that. We weren't ready for conversation yet. Maybe we never would be. But the anger was gone, replaced by something that felt like acceptance. Henderson's Auto Parts had closed 4 months after Rick's arrest. The building was now a cell phone repair shop run by a young couple from 2 towns over. Dad had taken a part-time job at the hardware store, not because he needed the money, but because he needed something to do with his hands. Mom had started volunteering at the library, helping with their literacy program. Tyler was working for Peterson's Automotive, learning to be a mechanic instead of a salesman. According to mutual friends, he was good at it. Quiet, focused, reliable. Different from the Tyler I'd grown up with, but maybe that wasn't a bad thing. I'd heard all this through the small-town grapevine, not from them directly. We hadn't spoken since that day in the shop when Agent Chen delivered the final verdict on their financial situation. The silence wasn't angry anymore. It was just complete. I learned to stop checking my phone for messages that weren't coming. Stopped driving past the house on Sunday afternoons when I knew they'd be having family dinner. Stopped hoping for reconciliation that required them to admit they'd been wrong and me to pretend I hadn't been hurt. Instead, I'd built something new. My accounting practice had grown. Word had gotten out about my role in exposing Rick's operation, and other small business owners started seeking my services. People who wanted someone who would ask the hard questions, who would notice when things didn't add up, who wouldn't just tell them what they wanted to hear. I'd also started dating Sarah, a teacher I'd met at a community college class I was taking for fun. She knew the whole story about my family, and her response had been simple. You did what you had to do to protect them, even when they couldn't see it. That takes courage. Sarah came from a family that talked through problems instead of hiding from them. Family dinners at her parents' house were loud, sometimes argumentative, but always honest. It was jarring at first, all that direct communication, all those emotions on display, but it was also liberating. "You're different when you're with them," Sarah had observed after our third dinner with her family. "Different how?" "Relaxed, like you don't have to watch every word you say." She was right. I'd spent so many years moderating my opinions, softening my questions, trying not to rock the boat that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just speak freely. The anniversary of Rick's arrest came and went without fanfare. He'd been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The other businesses he'd compromised were slowly rebuilding. The drug network he'd been part of was dismantled. Justice, I suppose, though it felt less satisfying than I'd expected. What felt satisfying was the life I'd built in the aftermath. The relationships based on honesty instead of obligation. The work that felt meaningful instead of just dutiful. The freedom to make choices based on my own values instead of other people's expectations. People still ask sometimes if I missed my family. The question always caught me off guard because the answer was complicated. I missed the family I thought we were. I missed the illusion of closeness, the comfort of tradition, the security of belonging somewhere without question. But I didn't miss walking on eggshells. I didn't miss being shut out of decisions that affected me. I didn't miss being valued only for what I could provide instead of who I was. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked me one evening as we were making dinner together in my apartment. "Regret what? Exposing Rick?" "All of it. The investigation, the confrontation, losing your family." I thought about it while I chopped vegetables, considering the question seriously. "I regret that it was necessary," I said finally. "I regret that my family was in a position where they felt they had to choose criminal activity over asking for help. I regret that they trusted a stranger over their own son. But I don't regret doing the right thing, even when the right thing cost me everything I thought I wanted. What do you want now?" I looked around my apartment, small but clean, filled with books I'd actually read and furniture I'd chosen myself. I looked at Sarah, who was listening to my answer with genuine interest instead of waiting for her turn to talk. "This," I said. "I want this. A life where I don't have to choose between being honest and being loved. And if your family ever wants to rebuild that relationship, then they know where to find me. But it would have to be a different relationship, one based on who we actually are instead of who we pretend to be." The sun was setting outside my kitchen window, casting long shadows across the counter where we were preparing a simple meal together. No drama, no hidden agendas, no conversations stopping when someone walked into the room. Just two people who'd chosen each other, building something honest together. It wasn't the family story I'd grown up expecting to tell, but it was mine. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. Have you ever been the family whistleblower? The one who asked uncomfortable questions that no one wanted to answer? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones we need to have most.